Good evening, Sheet Talkers. Good evening, Kristin. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you.
Great. I'm so glad you were able to join us today. Um, hold on a second. We have. Hello, Mr. Pineapples. We cannot hear you. Nope, can't hear you. No? You gotta love technical difficulties.
Check. Mic check.
There you go. Now
Ah,
we can hear you.
And the
sorry.
mic looks super fancy.
Right?
It's just like Sandy's. Just can't see hers
I
on the
don't I
screen.
don't have that thing on mine.
Oh, you don't have a pop filter on yours? I
I don't
thought you
even know what it
did.
is. Nope, nope,
Oh,
I don't.
my
Jamie,
apologies.
please meet Kristen.
Hi,
Kristen, meet
Kristen.
Jaime.
Hi, it's
How are
nice to
you?
meet you.
Oh,
I'm
Sandy.
good, thanks.
I briefed her. I told him I was like, he had some postmodern
I
realization
sure
thing.
did. It was back in 2001, 2002. So,
And
Hey,
I met him in 99, so I'm like, bro, you're Jamie. So
she
anyway,
had her own postmodern realization too. Whenever I found out she was pregnant, or I didn't even find out she was pregnant. It was like I met Sandy.
you saw my baby.
I saw her in overalls, and the next thing I know, there was this little thing, and I was just kind of like, "Whose baby is that, Joe?" And they're like, "It's mine." And I was like, "Sandy, you had a
Is that a
baby?"
postmodern realization, or is
I mean,
that
it's a
just a?
version of it, right? It's a
I
version.
guess.
it
Kristen
works.
doesn't know that about me.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm revealing too much,
You
Kristen.
are. Hi,
My bad.
CPJ. Thanks
Hey,
for hopping
CPJ.
in here. Oh, and I didn't even tell you, Kristen. So we have people that are going to be in the comments, so we might pause and answer questions if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Perfect. So tonight, we are going to be talking to Kristen, and Kristen is the executive director of
Voice of Hope.
Voice of Hope. Awesome.
Oh, voice
So,
of hope.
Kristen, tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Sure. So, like Sandy said, I'm the executive director at Voice of Hope. We Voice of Hope was originally established as the Lubbock Rape Crisis Center in 1975.
Oh,
So,
wow.
fun history fact: we are actually the second oldest rape crisis center in the state of Texas, and we're one of probably only a handful left of standalone rape crisis centers because a
Okay.
lot of people merged either with CACs or women's shelters kind of during the funding crunch of the 80s and the 90s. But we were able to keep doing what we've been doing for 43 years and not have to close our doors. So that's something that we're really proud of. But we are the crisis intervention for all sexual violence in Lubbock and our surrounding counties. And so what that means is we operate a 24-hour hotline. We respond with law enforcement. We respond directly to victims. We respond to emergency rooms, and that's sexual assault or sex trafficking.
Oh,
So if
wow.
anybody has unfortunately experienced that, or even if they've experienced that in the past and gotten help for it, and something's happened and they're triggered, they can call our hotline 24 hours a day and reach staff members who are trained and volunteers who are trained to help them walk them through that crisis.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
So,
See, it's crazy because I've heard of Voice of Hope, but I didn't know that you guys have been around that long.
yeah, neither did I. I'll be honest. My wife used to work at the Children's Advocacy Center, Kristen, for a number of years, and this is the first time I've heard of it. But I have heard of the Rape Crisis Center. I don't know if maybe
It is
they
the
just said
same.
that. Oh,
We
okay.
rebranded in 2013 because the people who need our services are fully aware of why they're there. They
Hmm.
don't need to be reminded of it every time they see our name or we reach out or things of that nature. So we did a little bit of rebranding almost 10 years ago now, just to
Okay.
kind of soften that for our survivors.
That's cool. Let me ask you real quick on because when you mentioned that you have people who are, I don't remember how you said it. The way I translated it was staffing the lines, I guess, staffing the
Mhm.
phones. You know what I mean? Like, so when people call and things like that, like you said, they are trained. What does it take to be a trained? What did you call them again?
So we're trained sexual assault advocates. It's actually a certification that is done by the Office of the Attorney General. And so we are licensed through their office to be able to provide this training. And what that does is it gives us the legal right to advocate on behalf of survivors.
Oh,
So when they're in a medical setting or different law enforcement settings, they have the right to an advocate, but
hmm,
they have to have an advocate that's certified to be able to do that job. And that's us. And so to
That's
go
great.
through our training process is 40 hours of classwork, and we bring in guest speakers. It's on the job training in the emergency room with law enforcement and all of those things. So you're not going to get somebody who's never answered the phone or doesn't know how to handle that crisis. Anybody who's going to volunteer with my organization or is employed by my organization has had at least that 40-hour certification.
Okay,
And
so
what
you
kind
have
of
volunteer advocates and you have employed advocates.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, wow. Okay.
where did the if you don't mind me asking, what are the kinds of walks of life that your advocates come from?
My whole team is like, we're so diverse. So we have 4 on-call crisis response advocates, and we have a retired school administrator who is doing this in her retirement, and so she's fabulous and has a great bedside manner. We have another lady who has her master's degree and decided that that line of mental health wasn't what she wanted to do and has really found her niche here. We have another one that came to us as an intern at Texas Tech and did such a fabulous job with her internship that we had an opening and we hired her, and she graduates from Tech in August.
Oh,
Oh,
awesome.
congratulations to her.
And so we really, I mean, we've had everything in between. We have 2 sex trafficking advocates, so all they do is work with trafficking survivors, case management, and walk alongside them in that process. And one of them is former law enforcement. The other one was a military wife, and they retired and came back to Lubbock, and she's been a CASA volunteer forever, and adopted children and raised children, and has just a great heart to be able to do this work. And so she works with our adult survivors and teaches class at the jail and does all kinds of different things. So, and a lot of our staff started out as volunteers. So it's something that you either find passion in and find something that you can do, because it's not for everybody.
Right.
And we fully understand that. But if it is for you, you start volunteering, say like me in 2003, and you never leave.
Wow.
My wife was working at the Children's Advocacy Center for about 5 years there. She was one of the therapists, right? So she got a PhD in Texas Tech for marriage and family therapy. And so she was working there for, I think, about 5 years before we moved out. And I will say it is a special job. And I don't mean that in a term that's, like low cutting or hitting below the belt kind of
No.
situation. It is a special job. Like one of the highlights that I can remember my wife telling me back in the day was that because I used to be like, how can you do that? Because I can't do it. I can just tell you, I can watch a commercial and I'm someone's cut onions in the room.
Right.
And she used to be like, okay, so she'd be like, think about that. How is it when someone's telling you their story, their abuse, or whatever the situation was, they're telling you their story and they're in that situation, and then you react in that same way. You can't have 2 people in the room as though there's an onion affecting both of you in the room, right? So you both can't be crying, basically. And she was like, so she's able to she can bottle that up, hold it, throw it away for a little bit, you know what I mean? Put it in the background. And man, my wife is a soldier when it comes to listening to other people and the various levels of trauma that they've gone through, and be able to help them feel like they're being heard and they're the center, and so it's like, oh wow.
Because I'm either
Props
one of
to
2
y'all.
things. I'm crying with you, or we finna go kill somebody right now.
Yeah.
Anger response. And
Oh,
that's mental health on like this side of the spectrum. When you're dealing with this high level of trauma, is a world unto its own. I mean, all of our mental health providers do an amazing job. And we need every aspect of all of the different things. But somebody in private practice is going to have clients, and they're going to see a little bit of everything, right? They're going to see some anxiety. They're going to see some marriage problems, certainly probably some, like abuse or some different things. But our therapists hear about an excruciating level of trauma every day for every session that they see. And that's hard. It takes its toll.
Yeah, I can see that. So I'm gonna say hello. Hey, Joanne, thanks for hopping in here tonight. Carrie would like to know, Kristin, does a TSA have to be requested upon trauma for one to show, for example, at a hospital, or does a hospital professional know to tell a victim about your services?
yes,
So it depends. Assuming they're talking about a trained sexual assault advocate by TSA. So that would be my assumption. If that's not right, let me know.
Yes, I think that's what it is.
So most of the time when they present to the emergency room, they present because they've been assaulted. And so in Lubbock County, the minute they tell, so if they go to either of our two major hospitals and tell triage that they've been sexually assaulted, they're going to be put in a private room. They aren't under most circumstances, 99.9% of the time, they are not left to wait in the waiting room with everybody else. They're immediately moved to a private room. Our advocates are called immediately and we respond within 30 minutes. And then we call what we call our forensic nurses, which are sexual assault nurse examiners. So if the assault has been within the last 120 hours, we can collect evidence.
Oh, wow. So it's 120 hours. Okay.
120 hours, you can still collect evidence. Even if it's outside of that window, we certainly want them to follow up with a medical provider. But in that 120 hours, we can treat for sexually transmitted infections and all of those things. And so it's really important that if it has happened within the last 5 days, that they report it as soon as possible. If they are over the age of 18, they do not have to report to law enforcement. As an adult, that is their choice, and they make that decision on whether or not the police are involved. But we at least want to get them that medical attention. But
so I'm curious.
Providers are very well trained in that protocol and the responses. And again, because we've been doing it for 43 years, law enforcement calls us if they're at a house and they're transporting to the hospital. So they do a really good job of reaching out.
Perfect. So then in this instance, Lubbock County, so they're not they're not asked a lot of questions until you guys come in, or how do they do that?
The hospital really doesn't ask a lot of questions.
Okay.
Once they know that this is what's going on. Sorry, I keep blurring out. But if there's other injuries, so I mean, if it has been, a violent assault and they need stitches or there's broken bones or other things like that, they're first going to medically assist and triage what needs to be bandaged. A lot of times they'll still call our advocates because we can be with the victim while they do that. Okay. But the SANE exam is going to wait until they're medically stable.
Okay, perfect.
The what exam? Say that again. I'm sorry.
The SANE exam. It's just the forensic exam for the sexual assault nurse examiners.
Okay.
So Carrie would also like to know, is it proper to say survivor rather than victim?
We prefer the term survivor because we want to look towards their future and not to what's happened to them. So we tend to refer to them either as clients or survivors.
Okay. Perfect. So she says, this is Carrie, Kristin, when did you hear your servant's heart calling? How did it come to you?
I think I've always just been one of those people that I enjoy giving back. It came to me from a very early age. My parents gave back to the community I was raised in. I married a man that also is very active and serves his community in different ways. But I found this niche in college at Tech when I went through volunteer training, again, almost 20 years ago. And back at that point, we didn't have a whole lot of staff at the center. I think we had a staff of like 4, and now I have a staff of 15.
Oh, wow.
And so we responded to calls as volunteers. And that was before we had SANE nurses. And so when you took that call, you knew that you could be at the hospital for probably around 12 hours. Because we waited in the waiting room. We had to wait for an ER doctor to have time to be able to do the exam, all of those things. And for whatever reason, it's hard. But sitting with somebody in that moment when they're really struggling, just, I don't know, had a special place on my heart. And so I volunteered, I served on the board, I've done administrative tasks, and then I came on staff in 2018. So it's just where I found my passion and where I think I'll work the rest of my life.
So you said something that kind of piqued my interest and I don't know if you'll be able to answer this or not, but you said, I think it was kind of a combination of two different things. There's the part when you said that you started off with 4 people who were staffing the center or organization, and now you're up to what did you say again? 18, 15?
15.
15.
Yes, sir.
So it was that, and then there was a piece about I don't remember how you said it, but it was something about having to wait in the waiting room. And I think earlier you said they usually see the survivors pretty quickly now. So
Yes.
it made me think that there's obviously this transition, right? So in the past, weren't as
Yes.
quick to adopt. I don't know what to say exactly, but now it seems like we give it a little bit more priority, right? Do you feel like what were the things in between that maybe that really helped kind of boost that from from where it used to be to where it is today? And I understand that there's probably more that can still be done, right? But what do you see some of those milestones from your perspective in those two in that gap?
Absolutely. So I think we're very fortunate to be in Lubbock, Texas. And I can say that more and more after COVID and listening to other advocate agents around the state. Because of the state of emergency, some of the hospitals did not allow advocates in.
Oh,
Because the state of emergency, it changed protocols and all of those things. And in Lubbock, we were never asked to leave. We
oh, that's good.
followed all of their protocols, but if there was a victim or a client, survivor, whatever terminology you want to use in the emergency room, we still went. So they
Wow.
didn't get any less information or any less support than they did pre-COVID. Back in 2003, when I started volunteering, a lot has just really changed. That was before Lubbock had forensic nursing. So I would say the biggest thing that has happened for our clients and the amount of time we spend in the emergency room is the addition of our SANE nurses and the
Okay.
hospital systems understanding how important that was in a lot of ways. So it was important because it took pressure off of their emergency room doctors.
hmm
Because if you have, 5 or 6 doctors on an ER shift and they're doing an occasional exam, they aren't familiar with it. They aren't comfortable collecting the evidence. They don't want to be called to testify.
Mm.
All of these different things because it's not what they're used to seeing. But now we have these nurses that specialize in it and train in it and have all of these hours in it that they know exactly what to collect. They know how to document it. They're professionals in the courtroom. They are forensic nurses. So they are unbiased medical experts. And
Ooh,
so as
I
soon
like
as
that.
we got to the point where we had our SANE nurses, we no longer really had to wait for that emergency room doctor not to have to, deal with a trauma. We
Uh-huh.
had the space that we got to perform what we needed to perform on our own. And I would say the wait time and the dedicated rooms and not waiting in the waiting room is a tribute to our emergency room directors in Lubbock. They
hmm
saw that as a need, they saw it as a priority, and they've made it happen.
Oh, that's so
Wow.
good. And now I'm like so proud to be in Lubbock. That's
In Lubbock.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if is it okay to ask more questions? I'm so sorry, Sandy.
Sure.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And Kristen. Okay, good, good. So Kristen, the opposite side to that is, you so what I understood you said, like the and I hope I'm saying it right, the SANE nurses.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so then you don't have to call me sir. The SANE nurses is what really helped propel your organization to really provide the services it does for those in need. What did you find during that gap or that time period? What was on the opposite side? What were the hurdles that really was like, man, this was we could really use this, and not calling targets on anyone or any specific thing, but maybe just in general, if you feel comfortable, what were the biggest hurdles that really was like, because sometimes I think common sense type thing, like, man, it makes sense that you would need a nurse who was, licensed or certified or trained to deal with, because these aren't just regular. I mean, they are regular patients, but what's happened to them calls for
With
a level of,
extenuating circumstances, yeah.
It's
yeah.
a
And
higher
so,
level of trauma. We've learned a lot about trauma responses, I feel like, in the last 10 to 15 years and how people respond in those ways and how it's natural, where before they might have just been like labeled as, be non-compliant.
mm,
So I think the nurses understand that more because they have that training. Our advocates were always there with the victim. I mean, we've been there since 1975. And so we walked that process with them, regardless of what that process looks like.
Mhm.
Even today, I mean, I tell people every case is hard. I mean, anything that comes through our door is easy, but some of them are really, really hard. And so it's just kind of adapting to that and knowing what that does. Technology has made a big difference in the services that we're able to provide and how we provide it. So, I mean, going back to the very beginning, our 24-hour hotline was answered at City Hall. And so a volunteer had to stay at City Hall 24 hours a day
Oh,
to answer
wow.
the hotline. Then fast forward to the mid 90s, a very nice family here in town donated a little house to us. So our office was in a little 3-bedroom house in downtown. You still had somebody at that house 24 hours a day to be able to answer that hotline and respond to that call and find somebody to go out on those calls. And then in 2008, or, thereabouts, introduce, a higher level of cell phone. Now we have call forwarding. Nobody
Right.
has to stay in my office 24 hours a day. When we're not in the office, we forward the phone lines and they ring to cell phones. And so we've really, I mean, everything has evolved over the process. With the addition of new funding, we've been able to add new services. So we have 2 therapists on staff that provide counseling to our clients free of charge. We also have a federal prevention grant, which there's only probably about 15 of in the state of Texas.
Wow.
That's aimed at stopping first-time perpetration.
Are you the grant? Are you the grant writer?
I do get to be the grant writer.
Oh, wow. Sorry, and congratulations.
Thank you. Thankfully, I came into a position with some great established grants, so I didn't have to necessarily create the wheel, even though we've written for some new grants. It's been more of keeping the wheel moving.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
But we're very proud of the prevention work that we're able to do to try to help build those healthy relationships with our kids so they understand what consent looks like and healthy relationships and those things. So maybe as adults, they make better choices. Is that going to solve all of our problems? Certainly not. But is it a step in the right direction? It can't hurt.
You know, and I appreciate you saying that, because I think that I don't remember having a conversation about consent / sex, those things when I was young. But I can definitely say I have 2 daughters. Both my daughters have had that conversation already for a number of years now. And, my oldest is 14. They're both teens right now, but they've had that conversation for a number of years already. And it was always important that the girls knew and understood what that meant. Even they didn't need to understand the details per se, but that they understood that their body was theirs, even when it comes to hugs, and that no one's able to just give you a hug because they want to. It's something that they have to seek permission for. No one gets to touch your body without your permission. So we didn't need to make it sexual at a young age. We were able to say whether it's touching your hair, your face,
but
hugs.
you gave them choice in the matter. And I think as parents and as adults, there was a generation where it was the kids were, to be seen and not heard, and not to, put down any generation. I think we learn from every generation. But I think then we had another generation that came through and it's like, well, no, that's fine. That's my grandmother or my aunt that I haven't seen in 5 years. But if I don't want to hug you, I'm not going to hug you.
Right.
And so, I mean, that's the same for my children. Like they know, obviously grandma's a safe person, but if you don't want to hug her, you don't have to hug her.
Yeah.
Like, you have to be respectful of your elders, but you get to have a voice. And
it's so hard, right? Like, because there's that part of me.
It's hard.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut.
No, you're fine.
I was just saying it's so hard, right? Because like you're saying that generational thing, there's that part of me that's like, yes, you have to hug grandma and grandpa, or you know what I mean. You have to kiss, whatever that. And then there's that other part of me that's kind of like, no, you shouldn't have. Why do you have to? Why am I pushing that? And I hate that, but it's like I'm glad I can catch myself and be like, Mom, Dad, what did y'all do to me? Because that's not what I want to force. I don't feel like it should be a necessary thing. Like, you shouldn't have to force those type of, with anyone, right?
At the same time, we have, where we've also gone to the point where, our biological names for body parts are not supposed to
Oh,
be used.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, so you have like the teachers don't want to talk about penis and vagina and those things because for some reason, like that's become wrong.
right.
Well,
It's
I
this
mean, in my
taboo, and
house, like that's anatomy. If my son comes home talking about it with a nickname, then I know he's talking to somebody that he doesn't need to be talking to because
mhm.
it is what it is and call it what it is.
Yeah.
It's so cool talking to you, Kristen, because it's like, because my wife introduced me to those things, and it was one time where I was the opposite side, but now it's kind of like, yeah, like, so, when talking with others, even or anything, like, even with friends and in my age, I say penis, vagina, or whatever, and it's kind of like, why are you acting weird about it? You make it weird. I'm not making it weird. You're acting
Exactly. I
weird.
mean, it is what it is.
It's
I
just
just don't.
it's because it's how you were raised. So we never said anything like that at all. Like we didn't
Right.
call it anything. And that's my parents' generation. But with my boys, at first we started out calling it something like cutesy, and now, of course they're grown or whatever, and now we're just, we talk about everything under the sun, and it has its names. But I
Mhm.
think it's just a generational thing, and we do have to kind of, you know, get rid of it so that our children know, are aware.
Yeah, I think it helps out because, like, so Kristen, what you were talking about, like, when you have to go before like a court, or not even a court. So here's my take on it: is I like labels. Okay,
Mhm.
I know it's not the popular term. I appreciate labels because there's no misconception around it, right? There's no I accept this word and this word is the same thing, and it's kind of like, no, they're not the same thing, right? Like, if you're saying pee or my private part, or or whatever, I don't want to stick on this on the sexual organs all the time, but you know what I mean,
Chonies.
whatever it is, like, for me it's kind of like that's up for interpretation, or
It is.
and who's
So you
talking
have
to
to
you
ask a
about that.
lot of qualifying questions to make sure that what they're telling us is what we assume that they're telling us.
Right.
I mean,
Because
and
if not,
there's
we start going in this direction. It's kind of like, wait a minute. And then things can blow up. And all of a sudden you're like, but you said this. And they're like, oh, perfect example. My daughter came home one day and she was like, Dad, she was so heartbroken. And was like, what happened? And she goes, I accidentally said a bad word. And I was like, oh my gosh, what did you say? And she goes, you're not going to be happy. You said not to say it. But, and I'll be like, and I've given this to my kids several times. I'm like, you have permission to say it one time. You're not gonna get in trouble if you say it. So,
right.
so go ahead and tell me. And she'll be like, I said stupid. Oh no, she says I said the S word, and I was like, what's the S word? And she goes, stupid. And she's crying, and I'm like, okay.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
So yeah, okay.
So hold on, just so we got
Uh-huh.
some comments coming in here. How do you unwind? Does your work provide therapy for you to get the weight of your day off?
Um, so we are big on self care. That's become a very big key phrase in this industry the last several years because secondary trauma is very much a real thing. So we have a great time off policy. We have a great benefits package so people can afford to go to the doctor if they need to go to the doctor, or see a therapist if they need to see a therapist. If it's been a really bad case, we certainly have sent our team for therapy. I would say probably about half of my team is in active therapy just as a way to maintain.
Mm-hmm.
And then the others do different things. They like to exercise, they like to run. So we try really hard not to define what self care looks like for them because it's a very personal thing. But they are given an hour every week on our clock to make sure that they are seeking that self care. And
Yeah.
that's not
Wow.
time to run errands for, your kids or your spouse or do laundry or whatever that is, but that's really meant to make sure that you're taking care of you. Because if I
Hmm.
can keep your cup full, then we're doing you a service and we're helping our clients. But if your cup runs empty,
Mm,
refilling your cup in this line of work isn't going to happen.
that's a great
Wow,
point.
that
Glad you
is.
shared that.
Dahlia says, "Hi, Kristen."
Hey,
Hi,
Dahlia,
Dahlia.
long time.
Carrie says, "From the stories you've heard, how do you recommend parents or guardians speaking to their children, teen, college kids about what to do if sexual trauma enters their world without scarring them? One, how can they help a friend? Two, how can they help themselves should it happen?
Hmm.
Um, Definitely, and this is really hard, I mean, for a lot of people, but you have to listen to what they have to say without any judgment. Um, and so there's a lot of blaming, victim blaming in our society.
Oh, yes.
So it doesn't matter if they were out drinking or what they were wearing or what led up to it or if they went on a date with this person and kissed them. I mean, all of the things that, we go down a rabbit hole in here. And so I think at an early age, it's talking about those healthy relationships. If you haven't watched the YouTube video about consent, where it talks about drinking tea, you really should. Now, there is a G rated version and an R rated version. Watch whichever one you prefer. It just has a bunch of profanity in one where it's not the other. And it really breaks down how simple consent should be. And then you have to keep those lines of communication open. So when there's a problem, hopefully they come to you. You don't want them to go to Google or maybe, a friend that doesn't have the right answers. There's also national hotlines that are completely anonymous that they can call and seek help. And those national hotlines, whether it's RAIN for sexual assault or Polaris for sex trafficking, are going to refer them to a local resource. So if you call either of those hotlines for Lubbock or the surrounding 21 counties, you're going to get transferred to my hotline. And you're going to get a person here that can offer peer support. We can get you into counseling and we can help guide you through some of those things. One of the big things we see right now with teens, we've put a lot of technology in front of them. Mm-hmm. And sexting has become a very big thing between our kids.
Oh my gosh.
And the minute you start taking pictures, whether you're taking pictures and sending it to your girlfriend or vice versa, they're screenshotting it, they're sending it on, they're under the age of 18, you're sending that to another phone, it's child pornography.
Yes.
Kristin, I had this conversation with my kid. My kid was 18 in high school. And I said, look, do not send or receive any kind of picture. I said, because you're 18 and it doesn't matter that you're still in school. You will be a registered sex offender for the rest of your life. Do you understand me?
But it's not just 18-year-olds though, right?
Yeah, those 17.
My kids, I had this conversation with them when they got their first cell phone. So I'm in IT, Kristin. And so I know some of those laws and how they work out. So when my kids got their first phone at like 10 and 12, each of them had their own maturity age. We felt that they could use it. Sure. They each had the conversation was like, you do not take pictures of your friends at school and send those to anyone. Like you can't send them. Like for my kids in my home, it's better that I just cut it all out completely instead of being like, there's this when they get older, like my 14-year-old, it's easier to have that conversation. She can process and understand it. My 10-year-old, it was like, no, you just don't take pictures of anyone and send it to anywhere.
Exactly. A viewer of anything. Because, then you get into the trafficking side of things and the grooming, and you have people reaching out to our kids, and they're like, well, send us a picture. And they just send, like a selfie. It's no big deal, right? And they're having this conversation, and then a couple weeks later, it's, hey, send me a picture without your shirt on or something. And the kid goes, no, I'm not doing that. And then the person on the other end's like, well, your mom doesn't want to know that you sent me a picture in the first place, or you told me where you went to school, where you did X, Y, and Z. So send me this picture or I'm going to tell. So, our kids are being manipulated with technology that they don't have the brain space to be able to
understand what it means, right? See, the impact of it.
And then you say that, and there was an article, and I saw it on Twitter, where this young boy, it might have been 16 or 17, sent a nude picture to somebody who he thought was the girl that he was talking to, and then they started to sextort him. Mm-hmm. In other words, like, give us money or we'll release the pictures to your list. And so anyway, he didn't tell his parents, and he ended up committing suicide. And it's like, so one of the girls ended up receiving a picture of him, and she was like, he killed himself because of you. And they were like, good. And so immediately I stop right there, and I go and tell my kid, I'm like, listen, do not ever do this, one. But if you do, just know that there's nothing that you can do that we can't fix.
Yes.
I'm like, no one is going to threaten us. No one's going to come harm us. You tell us, like, there is nothing worth taking your life over. I promise you. We've all made mistakes. You guys are just, in a different technology riddled in you know, area, and
Generation.
so generation, and so, but you know, it's I'm sad that I have to have that
Yeah,
conversation
yeah,
with
yeah.
my kid. I'm sad that that has come to this.
I mean,
Kristen,
it's all of it, and it's knowing like that they're going to come to you with that conversation. I read something that said that the average child is exposed to hardcore pornography at like the age of 10.
yep.
I mean,
Yes.
because they're on these YouTube videos and they accidentally click on something, and next thing you
Yeah.
know, they're on a different website.
You can't
And
trust it, guys. And I'm sorry, you're getting me on my. I'm gonna sit on my parapet for a minute, Kristen, because let me tell you, no amount of technology is going to guarantee that your children are 100% safe from any and all types of anything,
exactly.
violence, pornography, extortion of any kind. Technology is not going to help you 100%. The only thing that does that is you.
You being
You.
active, you watching what your kids are watching. I know
You
that one of
cannot
my, go ahead.
you cannot feign I don't know about technology, so that's why I just let them do whatever. You don't get to say that. These are your babies. These are your children. If not you, then the predator down the road.
They're
If
going to be
not
more than
you,
happy to have the conversation.
yes.
Yeah.
And twist it and all these things. You have to get to know. There's YouTube. You know how to search for a trial that's happening or the latest TikTok trend. You can search for how
You
do
can
I
be on
just check
Facebook, you
my
know.
yeah. You can just search for how do I check my child's history on their phone?
Yeah.
How do I protect against? You can search anything. It's better than just saying I don't know enough about technology. I taught classes on this to parents and guardians on how to protect their children from the dangers of the internet. It's something I passionately believe about, and I get it, parents. I get it, guardians. It's challenge. The technology world is a challenge. Do not let the person who you don't want teaching your kids or being around your kids teach them. Do not let them do it. You have to do it. Okay. I'm going to get off. I'm sorry.
Hold on, let me just a couple of comments. Hi, Sean. Thank you for joining us tonight.
God.
And Carrie says shame talk is huge.
Yeah. Kristen, I wanted to ask you, in lieu of the conversation we were having just a moment ago, what are so you do your clients range, right? So you have a range from I'm assuming is young children up to adults, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we've gotten a few questions in here for children, for example. So maybe we can hover there for a little bit longer. What is your advice on how? Oh, did she already ask it and we kind of covered it? I don't think so. What to do if they're in that trauma? How can they help them? Oh, how can they help a friend? How can they help themselves should it happen? Did we answer that?
We did. Yeah, she
We
did.
talked a little bit about that. I would always recommend going to an expert, going to somebody that can help. From finding out that there, in my hometown, was a coach who was victimizing boys while we were in high school, and none of them felt comfortable talking about it. And the few that did talk to people that were not educated enough to respond correctly. It's very, very important that you seek the right resources.
Do you feel like a lot of parents in those examples were they? Because I always had this assumption all parents really want what's best for their kids, and sometimes our kids don't want us to take them through that, rake them through the mud with that because they're like, I just want to put it behind me or whatever else. What is your advice for us parents, myself included, when we have those scenarios? Like, because I know that children, they don't want to have to deal with something sometimes, and they just kind of be like out of sight, out of mind.
They don't. And a lot of times, honestly, it's probably harder for them to talk to the parent because, again, at a very early age, we blame ourselves. So, I mean, we see kids who think that, they should have fought back. They should have been able to stop it. They should have been able to do X, Y, Z. So, victim blaming and self-blaming starts at a very early age. And so we see clients that will have a conversation with us and we'll open up and we can start that healing process, but they don't want to talk about it in front of mom and dad. They don't want mom and dad to know what happened because they don't want that burden of hurting their parents or letting
Mhm.
their parents down because, again, they think they should have been able to stop it.
Yeah.
I see that.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important that you get an outside source, but it's equally important that you get a trained outside source.
Oh,
So
good
I have
words.
nothing against religious support. I am a religious person. I find a lot of my self-care in those ways,
Mhm.
but your ministers and your pastors are not always the most qualified person to deal with these kind of crises.
Right.
I appreciate you saying that, Kristin.
So some of them maybe have gone to school and are. We have therapists that have, a biblical perspective,
Mhm.
but not all therapists are trained in sexual trauma. And
Right.
so
Right.
we're not all created equal. So it's so important. If you hear nothing else, then hear, please, please, please get the appropriate help.
I appreciate you saying that. So I remember one time I had gotten a wisdom tooth pulled, Kristin, and I had some brothers from the church who brought me home. Right, there was like 3 of them. I don't know why I had so many, but whatever. Their 3 were
You had a
there.
good
Right.
support group.
Yeah, I guess so. Right. They were taking videos of me because I was all on that happy juice stuff, which was great. But anyway, I'm at home finally, and I'm slowly just kind of whatever, and I'm sleeping. 2 of the guys, they start talking about, one of them is dealt with clinical depression, right? So they have medicine. Some of us, maybe not all of us, understand clinical depression, the difference between just feeling depressed and having depression. People with clinical depression, traditionally, they can't produce a certain chemical in the brain that helps them come out of the depression. So for them to be in bed, it's not that they're being lazy or they don't want to tackle the world. There's literally a chemical imbalance in the brain that prohibits them from doing what those of us who don't have that can just do and feel like, oh, we can just get out of bed, And I remember them talking, and one of the guys, he was like, man, there are days I don't want to get out of bed. There are days where I feel bad and I just have to suck it up, man. You need to just do that. And I remember I could hear this and I was like, you don't say that in my home. So my little, whatever, I'm like getting up and they're like, you okay? And I'm getting up. I'm like, don't talk to him like that. Don't say stuff like that in my house. You don't understand. You need to be quiet and don't say anything else. I'm not feeling good. And then I passed out after that. I was just like, and I was like, when I came to, I was like, did that happen or what? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, I still stand by that. Don't ever do that again. Don't ever tell them that again. Okay. So
And we hear a lot of, and we heard it a lot during COVID where everybody's like, well, we're in the same boat. And my whole thought was, we're not really in the same boat. We might all be in the same ocean, but maybe the boat I'm in looks a whole lot different than the raft you're floating on or the yacht you're sailing. So while we might all be experiencing the same circumstances, the life around us and the support system we have absolutely contributes to how we can navigate those seas. And so to say that, you pull yourself up from your bootstraps and you just get out of bed and you deal with it, and we're all going through the same thing, isn't reality. Like, you don't know what goes on behind people's closed doors. You just don't.
Kristin, thank you. Let me ask you about this. So we've talked a little bit about children, under 18, I guess we'll say. Let's shift over to adults, if you don't mind. So I don't know that I actually have to ask you a question because I have too many. So I want to kind of hit what's bubbling at the top for you. You have an audience, you have, this. I just want to be able to give you say the same thing for adults though. What's something that you can speak to?
Oh, I told Sandy I could talk about this subject or any of these subjects for hours.
I appreciate it.
I think, a lot of it is understanding that what we see in the media is very biased. There is a lot of self-blame when it comes to victims in these circumstances. I am a big component of, so there's also this misconception that rape is a crime of lust or passion and that people just can't control themselves, when in reality it is a crime of control. People do it because they're seeking control and they want control over that person. And unfortunately, most of the clients we see know they're assailants. And so while stranger danger absolutely has a place in our teaching because you need to be aware of your surroundings, strangers aren't typically the ones committing these crimes. I mean, we know that whether it's true of our children or of adults, they know the person, unfortunately, that is attacking them.
I hear it's like 70%, right? I remember that number being thrown around a long time ago.
I think our numbers are even higher than that.
Oh, wow.
Nationally,
70
probably makes sense, but I believe our numbers are probably higher than that.
So you're saying like over 70% of the perpetrators in
Assailants.
domestic abuse incidents are performed by someone that they know.
Sexual abuse.
Sexual assault.
Sexual. Okay.
assault.
Okay. Sorry.
My other big pet peeve are the words that we use. And so I have a slide and presentations that I do. And it's terms that you see frequently in like news things. And so it's like child prostitute. If a child cannot consent to sex, they cannot consent to being sold for sex. There is no such thing as a child prostitute.
That's awful. Gosh, that sounds horrible.
But if you start looking at the news,
Ooh.
you see these things.
Yeah.
Another thing that I see is underage woman.
Ugh.
Please, somebody explain to me what an underage woman is. Somebody under the age of 18
It's
is
not a
not
woman.
an adult.
I have a hard time believing 18 is an adult in my world.
That's
so.
a whole other.
I'm just saying, Kristen, unless you're 26, I technically do not consider you an adult in my world, but that's
You're a little baby girl.
During all of the things, right? And
Yeah.
so it's how we spin things and it's how we soften things. But in a lot of ways, sexual assault and sex trafficking is a whole other subject. In a court of law, the defendant has the right to face their accuser in these crimes. But if you think about it, in any other crime, that's not really the case. So if your house was broken into, and say it goes to trial, they aren't putting you on the jury stand and asking you if your door was locked. They aren't asking you if you posted about your brand new TV on Facebook. They aren't asking you if you threw away your Xbox box in the dumpster behind your house. They aren't asking any of these things because you are the victim. Somebody came into your house and robbed you, and they are proving the robbery. They are not proving that you did something wrong to deserve it. But in sexual assaults, that's not the case.
It's like a re-trauma. I feel like having to go to court and having to do all of these things, right?
It really is, which is why I'm very much okay with plea deals, with clients not having to testify if there's a way to put the bad guy locked up without it happening. Because it is, I mean, you're 3-4 years down the line, we've maybe pieced back together your future and are helping you deal with these triggers. And then we're going to put you on a stand and question all of your decisions almost down to the night and the time that it happened. I don't even remember what I had for dinner last night.
Right,
You want me to recall a very specific traumatic event. And it's just, it's not.
I imagine it like, as you say, it's like this puzzle that existed, and then all of a sudden some came around and jostled the puzzle completely out of its pieces. Then you come back around and you're getting that puzzle put back in place, and you're like, oh, we almost got this looking really good again. And then you go through that experience, like you said, 3, 4, 2, 3, whatever years later, and then all of a sudden it breaks apart again. And it's like, and so when you describe it like that, it helps me feel more sensitive to, like you were saying, the plea deals that, there's a reason why we don't see as many people being found, going through the trials and the motions and everything. And I imagine it's because of what you said.
Are our laws getting better when it comes to penalties for sexual violence? Or, I mean, how is that looking? I mean, is there something we need to lobby for?
It all comes back down to proof. And so, unfortunately, in sexual assault, in that trial, it's he said versus she said. So 20 years ago, the defendant said, I didn't do it. Well, now we have DNA that proves that you did. So now instead of saying I didn't do it, everything is consensual. Because how do you prove consent? I mean, you should be able to prove it with bruises and broken bones and choking. but then they just say that that's a fetish or something else. And so it's,
he or she can say, I thought she said she liked that. She made me, or he made me believe it, or, whatever
Yeah.
the case
they
is.
didn't say no. Well, they were passed out because you strangled them. How were they going to say no?
And then you have ridiculous folks who are like, if she didn't want it to happen, it wouldn't have happened. And you're like, what?
Yeah, don't even get me started down
I'm
there.
sorry, I can't help it. You know who I'm talking about, but
We'll be here for another 2 hours.
oh my God.
On the sex trafficking side of things, we have seen some better laws being passed. So specifically, September 1st of 2021, it became a felony in the state of Texas to purchase commercial sex.
Okay.
If you are any kind of fan of economics, supply or demand drives supply.
Right.
As long as there is a demand, somebody is going to supply that demand. And so for a long time, we were arresting the people who were selling the sex or being sold for sex. The pimps sometimes, unfortunately, are far enough removed that they're harder to get to. But the Johns were getting a misdemeanor. I mean, almost equivalent to running a stop sign. And so September 1st in the state of Texas, that changed.
Oh, wow.
And I think we're going to see a big impact from that. I hope we see a big impact from that. Because, again, if we can stop even a portion of that demand, we stop some of that supply.
And so, like, we would have to see that nationwide, right, to reduce some of those numbers. Like, so I didn't realize this was a thing until a while back, where women go missing at sporting events, or they provide women at sporting events. And I'm like, what? Like, how is that even? And it's a sex trafficking.
Sex trafficking, I mean, it goes back again to this whole supply and demand. Like, if you have a big event in town and there's going to be a lot of people in town for that event, then there's going to be a higher demand for certain types of things. But people also need to realize that the sex market is more than pornography, or more than prostitution. It's pornography, it's strip clubs, it's all of the things that kind of lead up to that. So, on big weekends, you can see an increase in those type of things. In Lubbock, and I hesitate because it can be geographical. If you are in a border city, is a white panel van suspicious and concerning and kidnapping an issue? Probably, absolutely. In Lubbock, Texas, is it an issue? 99.9% of the time, no, it's not. They are not kidnapping their victims because they are grooming them and building a relationship with them. And so what we see is more of that boyfriend pimp. Yeah. So it looks a lot more like domestic violence. They build that relationship, unfortunately, with young teenagers who are, lack of a cliche, looking for love in all the wrong places, or maybe don't have the best relationship at home to know what a relationship should look like, or any number of things. This really can affect anybody, any part of town, any demographic. It's not something that you say, oh, it just happens to these kids. Now, unfortunately, kids in our foster care system are at a much higher risk because they already have so many different things stacked against them. And they are looking for that friend and that relationship. And they're running away from these houses and all of these different things. So there are certain areas that are going to be at a higher risk.
So like our runaway children are probably at a higher risk, you think?
Runaway children, yes. I would go back to, if they're running away, they're typically running away from something. So we need to figure out what they're running from, because what they're running to can be equally as scary. Yeah. And so most kids don't run for the sake of running. Now, again, there's going to be an exception to every rule.
Right.
But the vast majority, if they are running, we need to figure out why they're running.
Yeah.
So SVU actually got it pretty spot on when they're talking about their child sex trafficking cases and stuff. It sounds like
SVU has done some pretty good episodes. Sandy and I were laughing about that before. My husband gives me a hard time because I like watching SVU, which he thinks is a little crazy because It's what I see in my everyday world.
Right.
But in my everyday world, I don't see a case. I don't see somebody arrested. I don't see it prosecuted, and I don't see it tied up into a pretty little bow in 60 minutes. And so sometimes it's almost therapeutic that, like, they get this
You're like,
result.
I wish that was our world. I get it sucks there too, but at least there's
Right.
some resolution that they're finding over there.
There was some justice in an hour.
And I used to love to watch
Quickly.
SVU, and I still think very highly of it. I just can't do it anymore. Once my girls became a certain age, I was just like, I can't watch it anymore. Same thing for horror movies. I used to love horror movies. Then I had babies, and it was like, I don't like horror movies anymore. I can't do it. So, speaking on the sex trafficking, I did read about here a couple days ago that there were 70 kids who were saved out in West Texas, East Texas. I don't remember which side, but I know it's Texas.
It was a West Texas operation. I prefer this term rescued, just because for lots of reasons. But so it was El Paso, it was Midland, Odessa, and I don't remember where else. And I believe it was a federal sting. And so a lot of times they'll run those things and they'll come in and they'll try to find sex trafficking rings and then get a hold of the kids and obviously get them into therapeutic treatment centers and all of those different things. And so anytime that we can recover children that are in this unfortunate situation, because statistically, I mean, they say the average pimp is going to obviously have more than one person because they're now dealing people versus guns and drugs, because you can sell a drug and a gun once. You can sell a person upwards of 10 times a day. So if you start doing the math on 10 times a day times 365 days a year for one person, and they probably have 4, 5, 6, you're talking about $1 billion tax-free industry.
And my gosh. That's like, it's unfathomable. Unfathomable. I just can't even. I can't even. Carrie says, so Kristin, can you explain why, for example, Josh Duggar wasn't taken from his parents with the underage things he and his survivors admitted to when he was a young teen? Why did Arkansas allow him to do the therapy his parents thought okay rather than prosecute?
Well, when you're in government, you can run things.
Well, I'm not an attorney. I don't work for the state, any state in any capacity. My best guess at that would be that he himself was a young minor. And so certain ages of assailants are going to trigger different things. I am shocked that he was left in the home with all of those younger siblings. But his age, I'm sure, probably dictated the response of the state.
So I watched about this actually, y'all, and I don't know how I stomached through it, but I did.
Yeah, I'm really shocked, actually.
So it was easy because the community that he lived in, his family, you remember the TV show, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the family was in a community that was an offshoot of the Latter-day Saints church, which one of those far offshoots is polygamy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, polygamy. So there were, they could do that. The idea was they have lots of kids and everything. Anyway, there was enough of them in this community where they ran the local government. And so I can't say rather than going to like the police, they went to the government. The government just happened to be like the minister.
Their people.
Yeah, essentially. And so like the father and the mother, they brought it up to the church. But the ladies, females, girls, I'm sorry for my choices, whatever. Sure. Ladies in that community were more regarded as objects.
Property.
Yes, property than people. So there were times, there was when after going through all that, the father went to the church and was like, hey, this is happening. He was upfront about it, but they were like, well, we need to send him somewhere, but we can't send him to like the what everyone else would send him to, because that's not going to be helpful. We need to send him to a special. So they did. Said he went through it, brought him back home. Everything was fine. They kind of rearranged the house, did some stuff. Anyway, none of it worked. Was the key. None of it worked. When he was indicted and sentenced last week, or 2 weeks ago, it was not for any of the things that he did against his sisters prior. It was
Right. It was
only
all
because
pornography.
all of that all of that led up to him getting his hands on child pornography.
Oh my
And
God.
that's what he was convicted of and sentenced. And I listened to the whole not argument, testimony, interview. Listen to the interview when FBI showed up, and he's just talking, and he is without a care. Literally doesn't sound like he's like, I'm not on any radar. I'm untouchable. You can't get me. And at one point, he finally clicks for him. He's like, is this something in one of my computers? Are you saying one of my computers? And the guy's like, yes. Now that we're being open, basically, yes, we know that child pornography was downloaded here. And he was like, and you have that, you're 100% sure because my IP address, right? And the officer was like,
Oh my God.
and then he starts seeing clicking, goes downhill from that. And he's like, oh, I'm busted, aren't I?
And I do think some of the laws with like mandatory reporting have probably changed in the, decade and a half since, because I don't know how old Josh Duggar is, but I know this has been ongoing for quite some time. But if you look at their family structure, they were homeschooled. So it's not like they were going to school with teachers that they're going to tell. Another thing with kids that age that is something that the CAC educates on is if we don't tell them what a healthy relationship looks like, and you have somebody who's being abused, they're sitting in that classroom assuming that everybody else is living the same life they are. So if they don't know,
they had a dynamic in their families where the older sibling took care of the younger sibling.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it was like every other, right? So the oldest took care of the youngest. Then the next oldest took care of the youngest. And the problem here was also just too many kids. And their thing was like, God is going to make you have a baby, then you let it have a baby. You don't not stop it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so they were like, that's why they had 19 kids and up. And every child above 6 years of age was responsible for a child below them. And since he was the oldest, I hate saying it like this, he had his choice of any of the younger kids below him.
It's so disgusting.
It really is. And I'm sorry to say it like that, but
and he had a position of authority. He was the oldest son. And so
at certain points his dad was all like praising him, like, here's our big shot right now, after he went through his like first or second rehabilitation thing.
Yeah.
He was being lauded around.
Praised.
Yeah. And you could hear
everything was swept under the rug.
It was.
It's the sweeping it under the rug. Look at what what families, what churches, what everybody's done forever on like abuse was reported and it was handled within and there was no repercussions.
Yeah, no consequences.
We're starting to see that now in like our trainings is these perpetrators look for legitimate access to our children, regardless of how that is. And so we tell people, if you have somebody who comes into your life and they're too helpful, that should be a red flag. Like you shouldn't be offering to do all of these things for me. A coach is great, but your coaching responsibility ends at coach. Like you don't need to be more involved in that. Youth pastor, teachers. And there's a lot of great people out there that mentor kids, and that's an important relationship. But we also have to look at the fact that these, monsters are looking for a way in to safely groom our children. And as
the internet, like we were saying there, you're the best line of defense for that. You can't rely on the technology in the same way. You can't rely on the titles that other adults in your children's life have, just because of the coach, the minister, the teacher, etc. etc.
Family, like, uncle.
Real passionate about single moms and these men that come into their lives only to chase after their children. This was just a case in the news here in Lubbock. And in a roundabout way, people had spotted the guy with a little girl at the park only. Mom's boyfriend would take one kid but had three but was really focused on one. That's a huge red flag. why would you allow him just to be with her by him? Like, single moms, I can't tell you enough. I know I was a single mom for a bit. I know what it's like. I know what it's like to want somebody, but never at the expense of your children. Think about your children. Do not let just anybody willy-nilly come into your life, and don't introduce your kids that, just, hey, I met this guy last night. I need y'all. Don't quit introducing them so early. I don't know. It's just sickening how many men meet single moms just to get access. I just can't.
And if your kids tell you
I wouldn't
something,
say just single men
believe
either.
them. Like, there is no harm in believing the child. Work the process, get them help. But when they tell you something has happened, don't question it. Believe them.
They wouldn't tell you otherwise. I mean, they wouldn't make that up if they hadn't made it up, and then all of a sudden this man comes and they tell you that. I mean, oh gosh, I just can't.
A lot of
Can't
times,
handle
I
it.
mean, and I think there's a lot of blame on the parents too. And I think there's this sense that, like, I would have noticed, I would have seen it. It couldn't have happened because now I'm to blame because I didn't notice it.
And
But-
society is not easy on them either.
No.
Society is not easy on
Society
people
and
who,
people.
who do that. And it could be, and I'll be honest, I feel like a little sensitivity because I'm thinking, man, I understand a little bit of, when someone who wants to be with someone else and they don't want to, it goes back to the euphoric feelings you feel at the beginning of a relationship. You see zero red flags. You see nothing wrong with them in that like first year or so of, dating, marriage, whatever you want to say, something like that. And anything you do see, you kind of like, it's okay. We're just adjusting. Again, the euphoria covers all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, in every situation, they groom you. One of the detectives that we work with very closely that does presentations with us tells people they don't punch you in the nose on the first date because everybody would walk away. They build a relationship. They start to alienate you from your friends and family. And then 6-9 months down the road, they punch you in the nose and then apologize and tell you that they love you and it'll never happen again. But if
your kids.
If that true side of them came out in date number 1 or date number 2, I don't believe there's anybody in the planet who would go back for date number 3.
Right. It's super methodical. It's super thought out. I mean, these people are master manipulators. Yeah. They've been honing their craft for a really long time.
And they're darn good at it.
And
that's what people don't understand really with the trafficking side of things is I wish they were not as good at it.
Yeah.
Right. If they put that much effort into getting a regular job.
It's not the dumb criminals that keep us up at night.
No.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Skilled Romeo.
I mean, I was listening to, what's his name? Jared Fogle. You all remember Jared, right?
The Subway guy?
Yeah. Did you not know
yeah.
that he was taken down because of child pornography? Like he's serving a big sentence.
Oh, really?
But he's not serving as big of a sentence because he also helped take down a ring. He was like, well, if I'm going to go, let me go ahead and take everyone else down who helped me get this. And so they're like, we'll give you some time off. But Jared, Jared,
we were hoping a local guy would give out a lot of people here in town. Some big prolific name here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'll tell you about it later.
Oh, okay.
As I ain't trying to get sued today.
What I'm saying to that point is it's not just the people who don't have jobs. These are people who are freaking on TV.
Wasn't there a lady on Doctor Strange, an actress that had some...
Her and her husband just were convicted for sexual assault of like a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
What? I missed that.
No, yeah. It's a Doctor Strange person in there. It wasn't, what is it, Benedict? Anyway, Carrie says, I can tell you this, my 11-year-old could never string together sexual words. Let's trust our kids. Yeah, for sure. Well, Kristin, I don't want to take much of your time, any more of your time. I really appreciate you coming on here and talking to us about it. Is there like a website? Is there like donations? I mean, like, what do you guys do as far as like fundraising? Is there anything that you want to tell us, anything that's upcoming?
Sure. So, you can visit our website at Voice of Hope Texas, and Texas is spelled out .org, for our contact information. we have our 24-hour hotline, which is the 806-763-7273. And again, you can call that anytime. If you call any of the national hotlines, if you Google, sexual assault or sex trafficking, you're going to get national numbers, and they're going to redirect you back to our services, because we provide services to Lubbock and the surrounding 11 counties for all of our services. And we actually work with sex trafficking survivors under the age of 18 in Lubbock and the surrounding 21 counties. So we have a very large service area. And if we can't help you, my team will find who can, which is what we're passionate about. I have a great team of individuals. Fundraising is always a big part of what we do. Grants are fabulous, but they pay for very specific things. Mm-hmm. So I can tell you, if we need to drive a survivor to court in a town 2 or 3 hours away, or if we need to get a survivor and their children to a residential treatment facility in Tennessee, which we've done, or North Carolina, those are plane tickets, and they are last-minute plane tickets, and it is not inexpensive. And so it's important that we have the funds to be able to say yes. My team is empowered to make that connection, to build that trust. And if we can say yes and help that situation, that's what we're there to do. So we do the last Saturday of every April, we have a really fun event called Walk a Mile in Her Shoes, where the men walk in red high heels.
Oh, cool. Oh, yes, I've heard of that.
So we were very happy to be back this year after, 2 or 3 years.
Are they open toe or closed?
Do what?
Are they open toe or closed?
We have all of the above. We even, we have a couple pair of flats because people have given up on the heels.
Because I don't show mine for free. Let me just put it that way. Okay?
We recommend very thick socks. About every other year, we do kind of a fundraising dinner with a guest speaker. This year, we're actually doing a 2-day sex trafficking training, October 18th and 19th. And so we're looking for sponsors right now to help cover the cost of that. And we're bringing in speakers and survivors and trauma experts so we can train the community on what sex trafficking looks like, how to work with these clients, and how we work towards kind of the restorative process. So my team,
I have a buddy who works in that field. He does
exactly.
that. Mikey Betancourt. Do you know him?
I do know Mikey.
You know Mikey?
He
okay.
Just changed positions, and I was unhappy to see him go. But so we try to bring those experts to Lubbock, because we travel and go to conferences and hear like the cutting edge research on technology and pimps and how they're recruiting people and grooming and self-care and trauma. But not everybody gets to go to those trainings. And so we like to try to bring that to Lubbock and impart some of that wisdom.
Perfect. And I'm trying to think. So you have my email address. Send me your form for the sponsorship stuff. See what Delmar can do for you guys. But anyway, Kristin, again, thank you so much for being on with us. I appreciate your time. And if you ever want to come back, oh, look, Sean's got some red high heels for you. And they're closed toe.
People kind of look at you like you're a little crazy. Not everybody has to wear the heels.
I'm sure it's in good fun.
If anybody has any questions that we didn't get to, they're welcome to reach out to the office, and I'd be happy to have a conversation with them.
So we did put the phone number down and the website. So
and we also shared the video that you talked about, the consent as simple as tea. That's in there as well.
I love that video. I mean, it just breaks it down because it really is so simple, but yet seems to be such a big issue.
It is. It can be. But thank you so much again, guys. In the comments, I appreciate all of your comments. And Jamie, anything else?
Nope. Everyone have a great weekend. Enjoy.
Have a great weekend. Be safe. Kristin, we will see you later. Y'all have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Bye. Good night.
Am I supposed to hit it? Sorry.
Oh, I thought you had it up.
Oh. I'm still looking.